Brent Venables is underrated?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Playoffs are over. Major League Baseball is going on. It's in the heat of its summer, but FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'm John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. He's Jay Smith. You can follow him on Twitter at Unfair Sports. And Paul Finebaum, who always has a take out there, mentioned this most recently about Brent Venables, saying, I was with Coach Venables in Norman 2 weeks ago, and a couple other times. To me, he is very underrated. If you take Brent Venables out of Clemson, Dabo Swinney may have a title. He may not have a title or two titles and 6 playoff appearances. Jay, I think that's a place where Brent Venables has an argument, and Oklahoma fans have an argument for why their head coach is so valuable and so important and probably going to be the guy that helps Oklahoma get back to a national title because of what he's done on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, he is one of the best defensive coordinators of the last 2 decades.
No, 100% agree. And shout out to you, Sooner fans. It is official. You've got people calling into Paul Finebaum show talking about your team. We are SEC now. That was the official need, right? I mean, if we had a few people make comments to Paul and all of them in some capacity, but no, that was a caller that called in and said they felt like Venables was underrated. And as you saw with the quote, Finebaum said, I agree. And he walked through all of that. And just as you said, defensively, Venables has been one of the best in the country in his tenure. I mean, if you go back to 99, 2000, all the way up in whatever capacity was a DC, he's been up there at the top year in and year out. And so, no, we're at the point now that people are calling a Finebaum and talking about us. John, I'm excited just the fact that we're there now. We're home. We should feel good. But to his point, Paul's been doing a lot of talking, man. We've noticed that, every time someone mentions Oklahoma, I'm getting nervous now. He's starting to provide positive feedback. Should I be nervous?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where it's okay. 1 week he's talking up Oklahoma's future and how positive he feels about where they're headed and the direction that they're headed. And then the next week he's like, okay, they're not ready for 2024. So it's a and both sort of situation. We're both getting positive feedback from Paul Finebaum. We're also getting some negative feedback from Paul Finebaum, but that's just kind of the way it goes as you're an Oklahoma team that is replacing your offensive line and you have a first-year quarterback in Jackson Arnold. But I think what is the most important out of this is that Brent Venables is the guy. He's the dude that I think everybody across the country, you heard, Kirby Smart talk about it. You heard Nick Saban talk about it. You've heard Paul Finebaum talk about it. Everybody that's been asked about Brent Venables talks about what a great coach he is. And to me, that's the most important aspect of any of this, because we're seeing the recruiting. We saw the 6-7 to 10-3 turnaround, and we've seen them continue to recruit at a high level, both in the high school ranks and the transfer portal ranks. So, I mean, if Paul Finebaum wants to say my head coach is underrated, far be it for me to disagree. I think he's a great head coach, and I think he's ascending towards getting Oklahoma to a national title.
Yeah, I think at this point we probably need to just accept it too, right? Like I say that tongue in cheek if I'm getting nervous, but no, really, we're starting to hear a lot of the national media kind of turn their tune about us, right? It's initially, as you said, got a new offensive line, you've got a young quarterback. How are they going to be able to manage that? And I get where the questions come in. Like I said, I don't have concerns at all on this team. I think every unit's going to be just fine. I have questions of what level they're going to be. Are these going to be elite players, or are they going to be just good players? Because I don't think we're going to have a bad position group on this team right now because of how well we've recruited and how well we've been coached, right? So that's not something for me. But even adding to this, there was a lot of praise for Venables when it came to media days, right? We talked about it last week, but I mean, just to kind of add to that, a lot of people talked about how they were impressed with him speaking. Heck, just it still cracks me up. I saw opposing teams. I saw Oklahoma State dude tweet this. I saw a Texas guy tweet this. They're like, "Hey man, hate to say it, but I really like this Venables guy." Like, I mean, like not even as a shade or a joke. He's really likable, and recruits say that all the time. He's that guy that just he gets along with everybody. He relates with everybody, and I think that's going to start rubbing off here in the SEC as we continue to move forward.
I think what I find refreshing about Brent Venables is that he says stuff. He's not your typical coach speak coach.
Yeah.
Now he does have a lot of coach speak to him because every coach is gonna, but he does speak. He speaks from his heart and he speaks honestly without also being a jerk about it. Like you have a lot of coaches across the college football ranks that speak honestly. I mean, Coach Prime out there at Colorado, like he speaks honestly, but he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Like everybody has, I say a lot of people, and I say everybody, but a lot of people kind of take exception to the way he says things at times. And he may or may not be wrong about the things that he says. Sometimes it's just the way he says things that is so abrasive and it gets people kind of off kilter a little bit. But Brent Venables might say the same things, but has a way of saying it that isn't always abrasive or offensive, but he speaks truth. Like I mean, he's one that said, hey, the NIL will be a part of Oklahoma. That's going to be a part of our strategy and recruiting, but it's not going to be the main thing. Like he's found a way to create balance in the way that he says things. Like we're going to play the NIL game, but also we're going to make sure that everything else is up to par and up to where it needs to be from a culture standpoint, a development standpoint, from a, building people standpoint, not just, yes, we're going to play the NIL game. No, it's yes. And we're going to do all these other things too. So I think that's probably why people do find Brent Venables to be likable, is because he does say stuff. He doesn't, again, just couch everything with a coach speak answer. And he also talks about Oklahoma in a way that's, hey, we're Oklahoma. We don't take a backseat to anybody. Yeah. At the same time, we understand the challenges that lay before us. Like, I think you can have a conversation where it's like, I am Oklahoma. We're Oklahoma. We can be proud of who we are and what we've accomplished as a program throughout our history. And at the same time, understand, hey, we've got work to do. And
yeah, exactly.
And Oklahoma fans won't even be offended by that thought.
Well, no, right. Oklahoma fans understand that this is a work in progress. But like you said, they leave no stone unturned when it comes to how they want everything to run as a system and how they want to develop people. And so that's what makes it fun, right? As well as the access that Venables gives, something that's new. I mean, Kellen DeBoer's been doing that at Alabama, and that's been like the talk of town because they're like, Saban didn't allow this, right? He didn't allow this type of, media access and conversations, but
talking to freshmen.
Right. But in this new era of college football civilization, you kind of have to, because that publicity, the content creators having access to be able to talk about that stuff, that's almost a key component because, contrary to popular belief, these recruits watch these videos, right? I've had recruits, parents send me DMs or tweet at me after I make a video about their kid getting an offer, So we've recognized that the social media aspect, the publicity and the pub aspect, it's going to be a key component here in the NIL era. And Venables and staff has recognized that. That's why you see that access. So yeah, it's a fair point to point out how no stone is unturned and how they're trying to run this ship. This ship the goal is to make sure that it's running as smooth as possible, while at the same time, it's disciplined. The focus is to win games, not to win a popularity contest. They still want to win them games.
And in order to win some games in the SEC, the Oklahoma Sooners still have a little bit to prove on the defensive side of the ball. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Right now, you have the chance to make every moment more over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. I was checking out the SEC title winner odds over at FanDuel right now. And obviously, it's Georgia at the top, Texas just behind them. And then a little bit further back, you got Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU kind of in that next tier. Oklahoma has kind of been that third, fourth tier of teams just behind Mizzou and way ahead of Auburn in the FanDuel conference winner odds at plus 2,700. So, a little bit of a long shot, but not quite the longest shot, as Auburn just behind Oklahoma sits there at plus 7,500. So very interesting lines over there. So you want to get in on the action, go to FanDuel.com. And again, make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jay, I find myself often being optimistic. That's generally how I slant. I'm an optimistic type of person. I have hope in my heart and in my life. I believe that the best is going to happen, that good things are going to happen. But at times I have to find myself taking a step back to just make sure I've seen all the angles and I've looked at all the angles from every direction to make sure I'm not missing something. So as I go and I'm writing stories for Sooners Wire and I'm looking at Oklahoma's defense, which I think is going to be really, really good this year, I found that I think they still have something to prove as a defense, and that's in their pass coverage. This was a team that, again, they improved from 99th in scoring defense to 49th by 6.5 points per game from 2022 to 2023, a huge jump. They improved their run defense, in which they were one of the top 40 programs or top 50 programs in the nation in run defense last year. Again, a significant improvement from 2022. Where they still have room to improve is in pass defense, where they ranked 112th in the nation, giving up 250 passing yards per game. And really, the biggest issues were against Texas, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Arizona is where really the big issues came to fruition, where Oklahoma gave up over 330 yards to each of those teams. So, Jay, I ask you, is that a concern for you at all as Oklahoma heads into the 2024 season?
Not at all. See, the one thing that I appreciate about our defense is that, yeah, we did have a tendency of giving up yards, but that's also a function of the way that your offense runs, right? We had, with the way Jeff Lebby ran his high up tempo offense, he had a tendency of having 3 and outs in under a minute or a minute and a half, right? So if you have a possession that short and is that ineffective, yeah, the other team's going to get a lot of opportunities to take shots. And we also took a lot of really big leads in these games to the point that only thing defenses could do is pass the ball, because how else were they going to go ahead and try to come back in these games? But the good thing about the way this defense played is, sure, between 20 and 20, we gave up a lot of yards. We weren't giving up many touchdowns. We had a touchdown to interception ratio of 18 to 20. Gave up 18 touchdowns, 20 interceptions on the passing side of the game. It's actually pretty darn good, right? I mean, that's something you would take, right, John? That's something that we would be typically excited about if we didn't look at the numbers of the defense, right? Looking at the way we was scoring points, we were putting up numbers last season. We gave up 30 points to 3 teams last season. That is not something we saw the season before or the few seasons before that with the old regime. We were giving up over 30 points on a regular basis. We gave it up only 3 times all season long. Actually, twice in the season, one in the bowl game when everything fell apart for us. But my point is, John, when you look at this and you really look at the landscape of it, do you rather give up yards or points? Which one would you prefer?
Well, obviously, you want to give up fewer points. You're going to give up yards. And I actually went the same avenue that you went, and I wanted to look at it. And the TCU game is about the only game where I felt like the game script got away from TCU and they had to just start slinging it around because they got behind so much in that game. But Texas and Oklahoma State and the Arizona games, those games were pretty neutral game scripts for much of those games, especially the Texas and Oklahoma State games. Those are one possession games down to the final few minutes. The Arizona one, the Kansas game, but they actually held Kansas under 300 yards passing because it was a rainy day in Lawrence that day. But the Arizona game is the only one that really got away from them in the fourth quarter, and Arizona actually was able to pull back and not have to throw a bunch in the fourth quarter to run away from the Sooners. So I like the direction that Oklahoma's heading. I understand that they play a little bit more zone coverage where they're playing, not to get beat deep. They're playing some bend don't break defense, and it worked out to their advantage most of the time. At the same time, they didn't play, I think, the depth of quarterbacks that they're going to face this year.
No.
Yes, Quinn Ewers is good. I think Josh Hoover at TCU is going to be a good player. Noah Fafita obviously is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country. I don't think that that's a stretch. And then Alan Bowman. Okay, I've taken enough shots at Alan Bowman over the years. I'm not going to sit here and say he's a top 15, top 20 quarterback. But maybe he is. Maybe he's a top 20 quarterback. But he's an experienced quarterback, a dude capable of making plays in the passing game. And I also do look back to that game that he had Texas Tech going, head to head with the Sooners. Man, what year was that? Was that 2019, 2019 or 2020? I think 2019, where they're just going neck and neck, and it's looking pretty dire for the Sooners until Alan Bowman gets hurt and is knocked out of the game. And then Oklahoma's able to run away with it. So those quarterbacks were able to kind of light Oklahoma up a little bit. And now they're going to have to face Jackson Dart, Nico Yamaleava, Brady Cook, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe under Kalen DeBoer's tutelage. You're going to have to face, an LSU offense. Let's say an LSU offense that's really good. Nussmeier had a good bowl game, but prior to that bowl game, he hadn't really done a whole lot. So the passing games that Oklahoma will face this year are definitely going to challenge them. And I feel great about the safety group. I've said that a number of times over the course of the last 8 months on this show. Feel great about the safety group. The cornerback position still needs to get better. The pass rush needs to get better. If those two areas get better, the pass defense will improve significantly this year.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to get to, right? I think the pass rush is going to be dramatic different in comparison to what we've seen before. We've got more experienced guys, and we're beefing up the other guys. And I don't anticipate us seeing a bunch of max protect until mid-game when teams can't stop our rush, right? That's where the problem lied for us most of last season. Of course, I know y'all have heard this. I say this numerous times, but that's the one thing that's critical is that dealing with a pass rush that pushes you around and you realize that, we need to go ahead and just protect constantly and then just start eating up that secondary. That was where we struggled. Now, the good thing is one of the biggest struggles we had in the secondary was zone. Like we were okay in a Brent Venables zone scheme. Des Malone is really good at that. That's his bread and butter. That's how good he was at San Diego State for the 2 years that he started. That's going to dramatically change. So with him and Gentry Williams running your zone and whoever else they decide to put as a smorgasbord within that nickel, and a linebacker room that's got the experience to recognize that, it's like the light bulb is clicking in a lot of their heads, kind of like it did for Danny Stutzman when he played Iowa State in Iowa State. That was when that moment hit. It was like, they're baiting me. Wait, they're going to bait me. Let me pick this pass off. Pick it off, take it to the house. You start learning those lessons, and it feels like a lot of them are starting to catch some of that. And I'm thinking in practice, they're probably showing them the same thing, saying, hey, this is what you need to look for. That way you're not, easily tricked going down the line.
Yeah, it's a team that's gaining experience. They're gaining talent as well. So I'm encouraged by all that. I just think it's something I'm going to be watching for over the course of this season to see if they can take that step. We've seen The scoring defense take a big step. We saw the third down defense take a big step. The short yardage defense take a big step. The rush defense take a big step. Now is the time for the pass defense to improve to the extent that it helps Oklahoma win these games. Again, they were good in some games. They were good in some games. I'm not going to sit here and say they're terrible. They were garbage. They were not what that 2018, 2019 defense was in pass coverage. No, they weren't that bad. They were not that bad. They were good still. Again, a lot of interceptions, a lot of plays being made in the secondary. So still a good, pass coverage. But in order for them to be elite, you can't rank 112th in pass defense.
No, I agree.
You can't grade out in the 60s by Pro Football Focus. You just can't.
No, I agree with you with that. But let me ask you this: who's the pass rusher that you think needs to really step up for the entire line to be successful?
R. Mason Thomas. You've got to get somebody that can get to the quarterback in the blink of an eye. And the only guy that they've got on the defensive line right now is either R. Mason Thomas and Adepoju Adebawore, guys that can just jump off the line of scrimmage and bend around a tackle and get to the quarterback in less than 2 seconds. I need those guys to step out and break out in a big way this year. Now you've got defensive tackle talent that can help you in that and pushing the quarterback back, not allowing him to step up into the pocket. That's going to help your edge guys be able to get to him a little bit easier. When they do bend around the offensive tackles, they're not having to chase him back up the pocket. That he's going to be standing there because Dejon Terry, Dominic Williams, David Stone, Jaden Jackson, Grayson Hall are going to be pushing that pocket back. So they'll have a better opportunity to kind of meet the quarterback in the backfield. But I need a healthy season of R. Mason Thomas. If he's healthy all year long, you're getting 6.5 sacks out of that dude. And you're getting a ton of pressures easily from him. He has the juice, the flexibility, the agility, and the quickness off the line of scrimmage to be an impact player that SEC fans are going to be like, wait, how come nobody was talking about this guy? Like, where did this guy come from?
Yeah, I can see that with R. Mason and PJ. That's the two that I would say the same, that once they go ahead and it all clicks for them and they're healthy and it clicks. Yeah, they're going to be the game changers for us.
Yeah. Hey, we're in the SEC now. Everybody's got to be a game changer. But what would it look like if OU and Texas were in the new look Big 12? Let's discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. So the Big 12, a very interesting conference now. We're not going to sit here and say it's the SEC or the Big 10, but it's very intriguing. And as somebody who has grown up in the Big 12 footprint over the last 20 years, basically, I'm still going to be very intrigued by what happens in Big 12 football this year because it's just right in my backyard. But Jay asked a really interesting hypothetical through our text messages. Where would we rank Oklahoma? And we can include Texas in this, in the new look Big 12, and where might the media even rank Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma in particular, in the new look Big 12? Jay, what do you think?
So in that hypothetical, I saw it come across the desk. I think it was on 3, George Stoya at Sooner Scoop. It was one of his mailbag questions that came up, and I was like, what? So when I looked at it, I'm like, interesting. And so we'll do it 2 ways. We'll do it with Oklahoma and Texas there. Also, if Oklahoma was the only one that stayed and Texas left. I'm curious to what you think about that. But for me, if it was both of them, because Oklahoma beat Texas last year, I think they'd probably make Oklahoma number 1, right? That's the team that probably should get the most. But if it was my vote, I'm throwing Oklahoma number 1 just because they beat Texas last year. And I think they can continuously do that. Now, the question is where things get muddy is when you start adding in like Utah. Right? You throw in Utah in there and just about how people feel about them and Kyle Whittingham coming over. They're probably the one wild card team that's probably going to cause the most problems in the Big 12. Well, at least they're the one that was voted as the best one there, right? Of course, Arizona is going to be terrifying, but I don't think teams believe they're going to actually win the Big 12. But Kansas State as well, right? With Avery Johnson and then getting Dylan Edwards. Kind of makes them scary. So if it was both of them, I think Oklahoma would be number 1. If it was Oklahoma by himself, I think Oklahoma would still be number 1 because it's the Big 12. Oklahoma's owned it for, since its inception.
I mean,
What
I can
about
see a
you?
scenario. Yeah, I can see a scenario where it's like Texas number one because everybody loves Texas this year for some odd reason. I'm being painted as a hater right now, and that's fair. I'll own it. I'm gonna get a jersey that says Texas hater on the back, just so
Like that.
everybody can be pacified by that. But I think Texas would probably be number one. I could see Oklahoma State or Utah at 2 or 3, and I could see Oklahoma being 4. Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma last year. I know
Fair.
Oklahoma beat Texas, but apparently that doesn't matter to anybody in the media, anybody that has a vote. Oklahoma's beating Texas apparently didn't happen. It doesn't exist. It's fake news. It's not a real thing. So I could totally see Oklahoma kind of dropping back a little bit. I don't think they'd fall below Kansas State because, again, you're talking about a first-year starting quarterback in Avery Johnson, and it's just a lot of turnover. I don't see them falling behind Iowa State, which for some reason is getting a lot of love. As much as I love Rocco Becht, I haven't seen Iowa State do anything significant except for back in that 2020 season. I don't see them falling behind Arizona, even though, I mean, maybe Arizona could be ahead of them, but the fact that they
Could
lost
be.
Jed Fish and their coaching staff, maybe they don't get ranked ahead of Oklahoma in the new look or the what if look Big 12. So yeah, it's interesting because the opinion on Oklahoma just seems to be so varied. There's a lot of
Yeah.
places that have Oklahoma as, man, they're going to be great. They're going to do just fine. A guy like Josh Pate from 247 Sports and the Late Kick Show. I mean, he likes where Oklahoma's headed. Paul Finebaum obviously likes the direction, even if he doesn't think there will be a contender in 2024. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are really down on Oklahoma going into this year.
Which is wild to me, as we've talked about, like a lot of your national talking heads really have been talking about that. Hey, y'all are overlooking Oklahoma a little too much, right? I mean, I understand being cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, don't be too pessimistic on what they're capable of. But it's really like a lot of your beat writers, your local media folks that really are pushing the Oklahoma ain't what they think they are. Oklahoma's going to come into a conference and really learn what it's supposed to be. And it's like, I still love what Andy Staples said. Every conference that Oklahoma's gone to, they found a way to get to the top. I mean, they've got 50 conference championships for a reason, the most in college football history.
Yep.
They find a way to get to the top of every conference they've ever been. They're not going to win it every time. Now, we're not going to have an Alabama Estique type run where like the 2 runs that they've had of 6 and 7 championships over like a 13-year period. We're not going to do that. But we're consistent on being at the top every single time. We find a way to get there. And the school has always shown they cared enough to be great at it. And I think that's the difference maker to me in the conversation is that Oklahoma would have found a way in this one, in the new Big 12. All these new teams, awesome. It's great to see more competition in there. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Oklahoma, especially because Oklahoma still maintains the same thing they do every year. Very high blue chip ratio. And they keep getting some of the best players. And by having so many great players, the question is always is what does development look like? And the guys we have been proven developers. All they got to do now is continue to execute. But I guess the question for that is with Oklahoma, with Texas out, if it's just Oklahoma, what teams will probably be around them, right? Like, is it just, Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas, and Arizona? Are those really the only ones that you would consider the ones to keep an eye out? With Kansas, also jump in that conversation.
Yeah. I think you include both Kansas schools, Arizona, Utah. That's about it. I'm not ready to put Colorado up there. I'm not ready to put Iowa State up there, even though, again, I like Shadur. He's a great player. I like Rocco Becht, a good player that's ascending. Just not ready to put them in that upper tier of football teams in the Big 12. I think Texas Tech is one that's growing and it's improving. But again, I think that's going to be one of those overhyped teams this season. Now, you take the new look Big 12, the 16 teams they've got in the conference. Who would be your early pick right now to win the conference? For me, it's Oklahoma State.
I'm still on the Utah train just because Kyle Whittingham has been he's always fielded teams that are just tough. So Utah is still my number one. Oklahoma State should run the Big 12, but that's never been their MO of actually doing what they're supposed to do, right? When they're supposed to have 10 or 11 wins, they end up with 6 or 7. When they're supposed to have 6 or 7 wins, they end up with 11. So they're not a team that I trust on consistency or expectations. They're forever a wild card in my eyes, even though shout out to, Gundy. Of all things, the dude's only had one losing season his entire tenure there, and that's been 20 years. It's absurd to think that a coach has been able to walk in and pull a Bob Stoops, right? Like, the rival has pulled a Bob Stoops, but they just always lose right before they get a chance to play for the title. It's just hilarious. It's the game of inches. They can never get over that 1 inch.
They come up just short. They come up just short.
By that much,
whether it's the BCS championship series rankings or the Big 12 title game against Baylor, where they just go, it's short. They're just now they blew it against UCF last year, where they got absolutely curb stomped in the space game. But I think Oklahoma State has a chance to do some pretty special things if Gundy can keep their head locked in every single week, because you got Ollie Gordon, and the dude is a terror. Rashad Owens, also a terror out there. And again, you've got a really, really experienced quarterback in Alan Bowman. So the Big 12 is going to be a lot of fun. Again, this isn't Locked On Big 12, but for your second listen, if you like Big 12 football, go check out Locked On Big 12, or you can go check out our man Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or Spencer McLaughlin and Locked On College Football. Those guys are doing great work covering all the angles at the conference level, at the national level. So go check it out. Subscribe to Locked On Sooners wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit the notification button over there to let you know when new episodes drop. And now you can also join the Locked On Sooners Insider Program by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. You'll get 25% off your first month, and you can have direct one-on-one conversations with Jay and myself. You can ask us questions that we will do in a special Q&A for you, the members of the Locked On Sooners Insider Program, but we'll also use your thoughts, your comments to create content here on the show as well. So go check it out by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams, the show again at Locked On Sooners on all the socials. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer.
Sooner.